Joining me now is Amanda Walker, standing in Douglas East. Your second time.
It is. I studied in 2016.
So back for more?
Definitely. I think the first time I really wasn't very aware of the process, so I think I learned a lot from that. I've stood for the council twice, so again, that I've got my name out there more. So hopefully enough of the voters will be aware of me and what I stand for, so that I might be able to actually make it all the way this time. I got 370 votes last time, so I think if I can hold on to those and just convince around 200 more on last time, that should be enough. So
Douglas is quite a busy place, as you know.
It's a very busy place, and of those 370 I got last time, it's very likely a lot of them have moved out and new people have moved in. So, I'm not overly confident, but I hope that in a very, very wide field with a lot of candidates, because I have shown commitment over a length of time and because I actually live in the area, that it may count for something with the electorate.
Okay. What are you standing for, though? I mean, on the doorstep, what are you telling people?
Well, I think I'm standing for getting the basics right, really. I think my primary focuses will be on health and education, and obviously the economy as well. And within the economy, I don't think you can separate out environmentalism from it. If you've seen any of the other debates with me, I talk about how we have an economic framework that's largely 19th century and focuses on GDP and wealth creation, whereas actually I think the economy now needs to be looking at environmental impact, because no amount of money in the bank is worth anything if you're living on a polluted and degraded planet.
And how much are you hearing back on the doorstep about these things that come up everywhere, the potholes, the situation in Douglas in general, and that sort of things?
I haven't actually heard about potholes very much.
Oh, right, okay.
So maybe a different demographic that I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
But I think people are concerned about the main thing in terms of roads is the prom, but the prom is almost reaching its conclusion now. I spoke about the prom in 2016, and in 2016 I'm on record as having said that whilst it's lovely to give Manx contractors the work, I felt at the time that we needed a big UK contractor with the big kit to come over and do it quickly, because I think the impact on the Manx business owners along the prom has been horrendous, and I think that would have been offset if we'd have got a big UK contractor, done it more quickly. They would have probably used local labour, so I think that would have been a far, far better way of doing it. And you only need to see news coverage of how quickly they can repair a motorway in Japan to see it could have been done quickly with the right people and the right resources.
So let's talk about national issues. What are you standing on? For national, for Isle of Man PLC?
Well, for Isle of Man PLC, I think there are a number of major issues that still need to be addressed. I think the impact of Brexit has been largely masked by COVID, which has been used as a general panacea to explain all of the problems, particularly supply problems recently. So I think there's an awful lot of work to be done on that still. And I don't think that we necessarily have to follow Westminster's lead on that. I think the Scottish Government has got some interesting policies that we could look at in the way that they're handling Brexit. And I'm aware, I have contacts within the Scottish Government, so I think that's something that could be developed. I think one of the perceptions that I often get on the doorstep is it doesn't matter how hard you try, Amanda, it's going to make no difference because the Isle of Man is run from Whitehall or is run by civil servants. And I think as long as we accept that version of events, it will probably continue. Whereas actually if you've got a group of people who are prepared to make real change and work together, and I don't think that's through political parties, I think if it's a group of like-minded individuals can actually form a consensus and a coalition and actually drive some change. And I think given the performance of the last administration, which on the doorstep I think is Marmite, either people think they've done a very, very good job or they think they were diabolical. And there's very few people who have an indifferent perspective.
So you could drive some change, you're saying here, but maybe civil servants do what you want them to do?
I think what you have to do is get in there first, and then once you're in there, you have to do a pretty rapid assessment of the lie of the land, which I think I'm very qualified for. I'm a politics graduate, I'm used to assimilating an awful lot of information. I'm a very quick thinker, I have a very broad scope, and I would listen. I'm very good at using this, but I'm even better at using these. A lot of my roles in school haven't been merely teaching. I've had a lot of pastoral roles, and I've had a lot of roles in developing policy as well. So I think that, and I've worked with the Chamber of Commerce and the Department of Education on careers education as well, because I think attracting our young people to remain on the island and trying to skew the demographic a bit younger, because we're the fourth oldest nation on earth. So
you're concerned about the age tipping and being so old?
I am, but because obviously it has impacts of things like pensions and the impact on the health service, because obviously people generally tend to need more health provision as they age. However, I think the reason we've got more old people is because people are ageing better and having an active life for longer. So, I don't think they're necessarily a burden. And I also think that there's an awful lot of wisdom that comes with age. And I think a lot of our older residents could have quite a lot to say. And I certainly don't think a lot of coverage has talked about, we need young people in because they're more dynamic. I don't think you'll find many young people more dynamic than me.
Teacher, skill sets.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you're fitting in within government, and would you want to be in government, or would you rather be a backbencher?
I think it would depend on the mix of people that we have in. If there are a huge number of new people, then you wouldn't be able to draw government from the people who have got previous experience. I certainly think that I have the academic ability and the acumen to be able to take on a role if it were to be offered to me.
Straight as minister straight away, or just department, or what, how high are you going to aim?
Well, I don't believe in aiming low. So I think it would depend, as I've said, on the mix of people. I mean, obviously, my background is strongly in education. And I think given that the last government had such an adversarial approach towards education, mitigated slightly with the appointment of Dr. Allinson instead of Mr. Crageen. However, I think there is a lot of work to be done. And I think actually possibly having a poacher turned gamekeeper might work in there, because I would be aware, as a school leader, I've had to cope with the budget, and I've had to, within that budget, ameliorate various different perspectives and try and find a way of working the budget. I think there is a lot of pressure on preschool education, which I think needs to be restored. I think it was taken out prematurely. I also think that we could do with looking at raising the school starting age. I think we could look at the Scandinavian models of education. I think there's an awful lot of benefits to allowing children to socialise and play and focus on well-being rather than putting them into formal education straight away. Academic attainment in countries with later school starting ages is certainly comparable and often better. I think we need to look at university funding as well, and I think in Douglas East we need to look at some of the buildings. Murray's Road and Ballaquayle, as they were, and now Skoll and Jubilee, have buildings that are really not fit for purpose. And for a government that talks about equality in education, if you compare the buildings that they have with Henry Bloom Noble just over the border, it's a clear inequality. Equally, Ninian's Upper School is in a pretty poor state of repair. There are some parts of it where you can clearly see damage. Long term, I would hope that the Ben Hague site might be able to be expanded to a single site school. However, in the short term, there is some remedial work that needs to be done.
Okay, so a lot of education stuff in there.
A lot of education stuff in there. Clearly
that's
my
your
background.
thing.
Yes.
So,
it's not my only thing. I am a very broad remit.
Fine, but if you had a chance or choice, that would be where you.
That would be where I feel that I would fit most naturally, and I think there has been a tendency in the past to not put people with an education background into that department. I think there is a real repair job to be done. So I think perhaps somebody who has knowledge of that sector and has connections within that sector. I've taught in 2 of the island schools, and my daughters have been educated in 2 of the others. The only school that I don't have a deep connection with is Ramsey Grammar.
Okay. So anything else you want to do, particularly, push forward on if you got in?
Well, obviously, well-being would be a very big thing, and mental health. I've spent the last 8 months working in social care with young offenders. I think we need to look very seriously at drugs policy, because I think the so-called war on drugs has been definitely lost, and I think there's an opportunity to...
It's about legalisation.
I'm talking legalisation of medicinal cannabis, and I'm talking licensing of other drugs along the Finnish model.
So not going out and just buying stuff.
Licensing of that.
Doctors prescribing?
Prescribed, and also being properly tested so that we know that the drugs that are being used recreationally are safe to use, because I think an awful lot of the problems are from the criminalisation of it leading to the criminalisation of young people who I think are basically in many cases victims of peer pressure and just doing typical teenage rebellion. Their lives are then blighted because they face custodial sentences and difficulty in getting employment and training in the future because they've made a mistake. So, I think that it's possible to look at a more therapeutic model that actually recognises that these are basically vulnerable children. I think quite a lot of them are also self-medicating because of the fact that it's very, very difficult to get a referral to CAMS. There's a very long waiting list. I think there is an epidemic of young people suffering with anxiety and other related disorders of mental health. And I think part of that is the loud shouting of Facebook and social media, which leads to people being atomised and not looking at the impact that their words have on people. I think it's far easier to say extremely negative and damaging damaging things and produce extremely negative and damaging images of people when you're not face to face with them. You can't see the emotional impact.
To wrap up our 10 minutes,
Yes.
who would you like to be Chief Minister?
I'm on record as having stated that in the paper.
Good, I'm always excited when we've got a definite.
I very, very much hope that Jane Paul Wilson gets elected because
Straight from nothing.
Straight
I say nothing. Yeah, excuse me. No ministerial positions.
Straight from having had a role as chief executive,
Yes.
from being a qualified lawyer, from being an excellent public speaker. I've seen her hold an assembly wrapped in QE2. And teenagers are a difficult audience.
And if you didn't have her, have you got second choice in the sense of what might be the usual runners and riders, or is it too? We can't say obviously we don't know who's standing, but
we don't know who's standing. I would have reservations about some of the people who are currently front runners. David Ashford has ruled himself out.
Yeah.
Dr. Allinson, I have seen him speak publicly, and I would have concern about him being. I don't doubt his intellectual ability, but in his ability to press forward a point, I would have some reservations about. I don't think he's a charismatic public speaker.